Another men's bracketology for you. This one is going to be from ESPN. We switched off of CBS. I really wasn't a huge fan of some of the different seeds that they had. It just felt pretty inaccurate to me. I like this one from Lunardi a little bit better. This came from the morning of the 17th. We're recording it in the afternoon. So there's a couple big games that are going to happen tonight that definitely can change a few things up. But I think for the most part, seeding should stay the same. We'll go ahead and start this off in the first four. UCLA, San Diego State. This one's interesting to me. I'm not fully sold that UCLA is going to make the tournament. And as you can see there, highlighted in red, that means they have dropped a seed recently, which does mean that they've dropped to the first four out from being solidly in the tournament. That being said, I mean, this is tough for me. I do think I am going to lean towards San Diego State there. Really could go either way. NJIT and Howard. I mean, yeah, I don't think it really matters who wins the 16 games. Santa Clara, TCU. TCU's honestly been playing really well recently, but I do think I'll go Santa Clara here. They've been able to hang with Gonzaga for a while in both of those games. And then Appalachian State, Bethune-Cookman. It would be the first tournament for Bethune-Cookman, but I think Appalachian State would be able to hang on.
Yep, no notes. TCU could end up making the tournament outright if a couple things go their way. The rest of their schedule is pretty easy except for a road trip to Texas Tech. And obviously they had that big win against Iowa State recently. But I think for right now, Santa Clara is probably the safer pick because they've been playing pretty consistently all year long.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the main bracket. We'll start off in the top left with Michigan and Howard. That one should be a free win for Michigan. And then NC State and St. Mary's. This is interesting because NC State played, I think it was Louisville about a week ago and lost by, I think it was 40 points. They just got absolutely wrecked in that game. So if a team can start shooting like that, I mean, NC State clearly isn't able to defend it very well. Um, I mean, I'm still torn on this because I think NC State's a solid team, but I'm kind of leaning towards St. Mary's here. I really no preference either way for me though.
I think St. Mary's is a safer bet here, and maybe this is just a little bit of project, but I'm looking at NC State's remaining schedule, and it's not good. They play North Carolina tonight. They play at Virginia. They get Notre Dame, which should be pretty easy, but then they play Duke and then Stanford to round out the season. Like, there's maybe only two wins in those last six games or whatever it is. They might be coming into the tournament pretty cold, especially if the ACC tournament doesn't go their way either. I would. There's maybe even a realm where NC State could end up missing it. I don't know exactly how that ends up working out, but if this last couple games and the stretch of the season go poorly, I'm not feeling too confident in the Wolfpack. And St. Mary's has also kind of similar to Santa Clara been in competition with Gonzaga throughout this season, so I'm tempted to pick St. Mary's as well.
All right, then Louisville and Belmont. I mean, 512s or sorry, Louisville and Liberty. I think it was Louisville and Belmont last week. Liberty, either way, I think Louisville has been very solid all year. 512s are very popular upset picks. I'm gonna be honest, I maybe only like one of the 512s the way the bracket played out this time. I think that Louisville is significantly better there. Then Vanderbilt, Hawaii. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I think Vandy is just a lot better. And kind of building off of last year's tournament, we really didn't see any upsets with the top four seeds at all. If that continues, then it might start to kind of spread out towards those 5-12 games as well, where we only potentially see one upset. Tennessee, San Diego State. I think that Tennessee is able to get that win there. That one, I mean, I could go either way on that because normally there is a first four team that ends up winning a game afterwards. I do think San Diego State has the ability. We've seen Tennessee struggle at times this year, still slightly leaning towards the Volunteers. And then Gonzaga, California Baptist would be the first tournament for California Baptist. That would be great for them. However, I think Gonzaga would dispatch them pretty quickly.
Even with how poorly Gonzaga has played sometimes, at least in the last few games. I still think they are one of the better teams in college basketball, although at least personally, I don't necessarily trust them to make as deep of a run as some people might expect, but that's just my take at least.
Yeah, I mean, Gonzaga struggled in their last few games, but they've been able to find ways to win. And I think that actually might end up benefiting them, when it comes to the tournament. So I'm not going to fault Gonzaga too heavily for that. St. Louis and SMU. SMU's dropping seeds recently. I still think they're decent. This might actually be a case where St. Louis can pick up a tourney win, though. They've been solid all year long. They have a decent resume. Probably still going to end up capping out around a 7 seed. I don't know if they can push it up to a 6. I think it would take potentially some teams jump that they play to jumping up quadrants in order for them to make it up to a 6 seed. So I have to see there, but overall, I still think that they could beat SMU. And then Iowa State ETSU, I think that's a really, really a game that Iowa State should win. They've been playing very, very well recently, picking up a win over Houston last night.
Yeah, really the only game out of those ones that I might go the other way is SMU. Not to discredit anything St. Louis has done, but I think SMU at their best can be a team that can cause a lot of trouble for some of these top teams. It's just they've had a pretty difficult ACC schedule, and I don't know, it could go either way, but this wouldn't be surprising if St. Louis also got their first win in the tournament too.
Yeah, next up's going to be UConn moving up to the one line, playing Appalachian State. I guess it won't even let me pick Appalachian State. I must have messed something up there, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem anyways. I wasn't planning on picking them. Auburn and Indiana. Auburn is still an 8 seed. And I mean, I really am starting to disagree with this the more that I see from Auburn. I feel like they haven't been playing very well. They still somehow end up being in the tournament. I mean, they're 14 and 10 and they're an 8 seed. They've had a tough schedule, but I mean, at some point you got to start dropping them. I think an 8 seed is too high in my opinion. If I was making the bracketology, they probably would be closer to first four out because I don't think this is a very good team. I think Indiana would be able to beat Auburn in that one, just especially based on how Auburn's playing recently.
Yep, I agree. I think Auburn has, I think, dropped 4 games in a row at this point, and Indiana, at times, kind of similar to a couple other teams, has proven that they can compete with some of the top teams. I mean, they even got that overtime win over Wisconsin, who's red hot right now, but obviously things can change. But I do think at their best, Auburn can still get a win over a good Indiana team, but I think at this point, I need to see something. I need to see a good performance against a good team in the SEC for Auburn. So we'll see what happens in that SEC tournament. But for right now, I think Indiana is a safer pick.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn definitely has had some good wins. I mean, they have 4 quad 1 wins right now. The only problem is they have 10 quad 1 losses. They have a quad 2 loss as well. And I think the most concerning thing for Auburn actually is they have a home win over NC State. NC State's about to drop to a quad 2 win if they pick up one more loss. So at that point, I do think Auburn would drop a seed just because they'd be 3 and 10 in quad 1 and only 3 and 1 in quad 2. I feel like that's probably enough to drop them to a 9 seed, maybe even a 10, because I think they shouldn't be an 8 right now. That's a little bit too much on Auburn, though. So we'll go ahead and move on. Virginia and South Florida. I do think this is a very good Virginia team. I watched their game against Ohio State this past weekend, and they didn't look great, turned the ball over, but they were able to just continue and stay balanced the entire time and ended up going on a run in those last 10 minutes of the game. It was very impressive. I do think that this Virginia team is very solid and should be able to maybe pick up a couple wins in the tournament, depending on who they play. And then Nebraska and Yale. We have been going back and forth on Nebraska because, for one, it would be funny if Nebraska never got a tournament win, even after having one of their best seasons of all time. However, they are having one of their best seasons of all time. And I think that Nebraska is legitimately a good team. They just dropped down to a 4 seed. And the only problem that I have here is that Yale has done this before. So we're going back to the original storyline. Nebraska is losing in the first round as a 4 seed.
Yeah, I mean, this would be my pick too, because maybe it's a little bit of PTSD from I don't know how many years ago it was, but I think I had Auburn as my champion as like a 3 or 4 seed, kind of in the same spot, and Yale beat them like at the buzzer by 1 point and wrecked my bracket. But I do think this is kind of a similar situation. I think Nebraska might crumble a little bit under the pressure after, like you said, having their best season.
Yeah, BYU and Miami, Ohio. This is an interesting matchup, and I know that Connor specifically has not been very high on BYU recently. I think DeBance is really good. I think they've had a tough schedule recently, and I think that they are going to figure things out by the tournament. And more importantly, I just don't think Miami, Ohio is going to win a tournament game. There's too much hype for them to actually be able to pull it off. And I think Florida beats Austin PA. That one's pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree. Wisconsin and Texas A&M. Honestly, maybe it's just the recency bias a little bit, but this Wisconsin team is playing like arguably maybe even like a top 15 team. Like they've beaten, what is it? They've beaten Michigan State, they've beaten Illinois. Do they beat Purdue recently too? Or
Um,
am I
I think
misremembering
Wisconsin
that?
plays Purdue in the last game of the season.
Okay, that's probably it. But besides the point, they have been red hot lately and have jumped back into the top 25 in the polls. And honestly, I have no reason to pick against them right now. I think they have shown that they can be a red hot team, and I think with the remainder of their schedule, with the Big Ten tournament as well, they will be able to kind of build upon that going into the tournament. Maybe even make a bit of a run potentially. It'd be a little bit hard as a 7 seed, but I think they might jump up a couple seeds as the tournament gets closer. So at least that's what I think picking Wisconsin here. And then Houston, I think, should easily beat Wright State.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on Wisconsin. I mean, like you said, they will actually jump up a few seeds. They're playing at Ohio State tonight. That would be a quad one win if they pick that up. A couple more games that are close. I think Iowa would currently be a quad one win. Road trips to Oregon and Washington. I think that's quad two and quad one. the the biggest thing is if they beat Purdue on the road, I feel like Wisconsin could potentially have a ceiling of like a 4 seed, maybe a 5 seed. So I personally think at the bare minimum they probably only lose to Purdue. So overall, this Wisconsin team could easily get up to a 5 seed. I would say 6 seed at the worst at this point. Moving on to the right side of the bracket, Duke should beat UT Martin. And then Iowa and Texas. I kind of liked Iowa a couple weeks ago. I've really not been impressed by them recently. The loss to Maryland was really, really bad. I think that was a quad three loss. So I really don't like that. Texas has been playing very well recently. They do have a lot of losses, but I mean, this is still a really good team. They've been able to pick up some really solid wins as well. Yeah, just overall, I think Texas is slightly better. So I am going to go Longhorns in that one.
I think consistency is the big thing. And I think Texas, even though they've been a little up and down at times earlier in the season, I think right now they've kind of hit in their stride and been pretty consistent. And like you said, that Iowa loss to Maryland is kind of still fresh in our mind. So I agree with the Texas pick here.
Yeah, the biggest thing with Texas, they have a quad three loss, not good. They have two quad two losses, also really not good. But they have five quad one wins, including back-to-back ones against Oklahoma and Missouri, both on the road, as well as some close losses against some really, really good teams. So I do think Texas. I don't see them getting much higher than a 9 seed, but I think they would definitely be a dangerous 9 seed. You got St. John's and SF Austin. I think St. John's has been playing very well recently. Then Alabama and High Point. I feel like I've seen this projected matchup before, and it feels like both of these teams could, like this game could potentially end like 110 to 100 because of how much these offenses put up. I think there's some upset potential with High Point, but not necessarily against Alabama. I still think Alabama shouldn't be a 4 seed, but they probably end up being able to win that regardless.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might think of last year too, when High Point was kind of in a similar situation. I think they actually played Purdue, and that was why a lot of people picked them. And I think Purdue ended up handling business pretty easily. But I could see, kind of a similar situation where that's one of the more popular first round upset picks. But as of right now, I agree. I think Alabama's shown that they are the better team.
Next up, North Carolina and Santa Clara. I think North Carolina, even though they lost Caleb Wilson, this is still a really, really good team. No quad two losses even for the Tar Heels, so they've played at a high level all season long. They're split in quad one, and they have 3 straight quad one games coming up. That's going to be a test without Caleb Wilson for sure. But even if they drop one of those, I mean, it's still North Carolina's been playing really, really well. I think they'll be able to stick around this 6 seed line. I think Caleb Wilson will come back this season. So overall, I still think that they are slightly better than Santa Clara and will take the Tar Heels to win that game. And then Kansas and Portland State. I do really like Kansas. The loss to Iowa State, it doesn't look great, but we have to keep in mind that this team was able to beat Arizona this week as well. So I'm not going to punish them personally in my rankings. I think that they should stay about the same, picking up and win over the formerly number one team in the country, but losing to a top five team. I'm not going to fault them too much for that.
And that loss to a top five team was also on the road. And I think Iowa State's actually undefeated at home, if I remember correctly. Yes, they are 15 and 0 at home. So, it's a tough environment to walk into. And like you said, I still really like this Kansas team. And I think they can easily make some deep runs in the bracket as well. Clemson and UCF is. I think it could be interesting. I'm personally leaning Clemson a little bit because I think they've been here before. I'm kind of thinking about last year a little bit, but UCF is not a bad team by any means. Who'd they upset just like a month ago or whatever? Was it Texas Tech? Did they beat Texas Tech at
I think it
home?
was Texas Tech. That sounds familiar.
So like UCF obviously can compete with these teams. I'll lean with whatever you're going here, Jonah, but. I might pick Clemson here, but I'll hear out whatever opinion you might have if you want to pick a 10 seed here.
I I don't think we have gone a 10 seed yet. I'm not necessarily against it. I mean, UCF just they haven't been playing as well as of recently. Ever since that loss to Texas Tech, they actually haven't won a game. So I think I'm gonna lean Clemson, but I'm not against picking UCF. I think really for this to end up happening, UCF has got to beat TCU tonight. They play them at home. It'll be a tough game. If they get that done, I could see UCF sticking in the tournament. Otherwise, that'd be 4 straight losses, and none of them are very good losses either, except for Houston. So, and Illinois and Merrimack, I think Illinois should win that one very easily.
Yeah, no questions there.
Arizona will beat Long Island. Then Utah State and Miami. I think Miami's been playing really well recently. I've got to pull up their net ranking as well. Utah State also very solid so far this season. Yeah, Miami's got a winning record in quad one. The quad three loss isn't great, but I still think that they probably end up pulling off an upset over Utah State. That's one of those where the 9 seed might even be slightly favored. Arkansas and Belmont. I think Arkansas wins that. And Michigan State, even though they dropped recently to a 4 seed, I still think that they handle business against UNC Wilmington.
Yeah, I think Michigan State and Arkansas are definitely two teams that can make some deep runs. Michigan State, I think the better of those two teams. Obviously, that's why they're IRC. I think they've just had a pretty tough gauntlet of a schedule recently in Big Ten play, but I think once the tournament rolls around, they'll be back like business as usual because they've been here before. I mean, Tom Izzo is one of the best head coaches we've seen in college basketball, and he'll know how to get his team to a win. Kentucky and USC. I know you talked about it in the last bracketology we did that USC might not end up being a team that makes the field anyway. And I think Kentucky, kind of like a couple other teams that are right around this 4 to 6 seed range, at times has shown that they are really, really dominant against some of their SEC opponents. So I think this is a no-brainer just because USC's kind of on the fringe and Kentucky has proven that they can still be a very dominant team, even if it's not like some of those old Kentucky teams that are the picks everyone has to win the entire tournament.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree. I mean, I think Kentucky's definitely had their moments this season where they've struggled, 7 quad 1 losses. They have a quad 2 loss as well. I really don't trust this USC team. Like Connor said, I still don't think that they're going to end up making the tournament. I think it really depends on their upcoming schedule, which they have 4 of their next 5 games as quad 1 games. So I think they're going to start dropping games, probably drop out of this projection into the first 4 out. Texas Tech should handle business against North Dakota State. Realizing we didn't pick that many upsets, and I'm going to stick with that because I still like Villanova more than Georgia. And then Purdue, they're not going to lose to Navy. Navy's probably the worst 15 seed in here.
Although it'd be really funny if it happened.
Yeah, Purdue's not going to lose to Navy. Of course, that's what people would say about, um, forget what the name of the team is even at this point. Farley Dickinson.
Yep.
Yeah, sure people said the same thing about them, but this time it's actually true. Moving on to the second round, Michigan and St. Mary's. I think that one's a no-brainer still. Michigan would move on. Louisville and Vanderbilt. Louisville's the lower seed here. I actually do like them better than Vanderbilt. I think they've been playing very well recently, and I would pick them to pull off that upset.
I agree. I think Louisville's just been here before. I think that's the biggest thing, just experience in the tournament. Granted, it might not be with those players they have on their roster, but just the fact that we have seen Louisville in this tournament before and have success, I think that's at least the reason why I'd pick them.
Yeah, Tennessee and Gonzaga. Um, I think this one Gonzaga should be able to win. I'm not a huge fan of Tennessee right now. I think they might be slightly overrated as a 6 seed. So Gonzaga again, like Connor said earlier, they've played a lot of really close games, but they're still finding ways to win. I think that could pay off in the tournament against a team like Tennessee. But still, I'm not confident Gonzaga can make a deep run. And then St. Louis and Iowa State. St. Louis has been playing really well, but this Cyclones team has been playing some phenomenal basketball recently. The blowout of Kansas was incredible.
Yeah, I'm at first, at least in the last two bracketologies. I don't think I was as high on Iowa State as you were. Now I'm starting to realize that obviously they won't be playing at home for like the entirety of the tournament, so you're not gonna have that undefeated streak going into the tournament necessarily, but I think the defense has been insane. If you're able to shut down teams like Houston and BYU on a consistent basis, I think that's just a testament to how good you are. And I think they are just so close to being that number one seed. It's just going to take a little falter from UConn or Arizona, I think, to bump them out and move the Cyclones up. Speaking of UConn, I do think they are still very good. They've had some close games against Big East opponents, and maybe Indiana could give them some trouble, but Dan Hurley's done this so many times before. It always seems like they play their best basketball in the tournament. I'm okay if you want to pick an upset here, but I think personally I'm going to go with the Huskies. But this is
Yeah.
definitely one that's close.
I think that they definitely have a chance here. And the statistically, I think there is normally a 1 seed that is out by the Sweet 16. But there's potentially another 1 seed that I'm looking at for that. So we'll have to stay tuned. I think UConn can move on. Virginia and Yale, I think Virginia is able to win that. Pretty easy path to the Sweet 16 for Virginia. BYU and Florida. I think BYU is really good. Florida has just been surging recently. I do like the Gators.
Yeah, I agree. This is not because I think BYU, even with that tough schedule, has a lot of stuff to prove. I just think that Florida, coming off that national championship and having to rebuild so much, the fact that they are still such a good team. I think it's a testament to the coaching staff and how dominant they can be throughout this tournament run. So I agree. I think Florida will end up moving on over a very good BYU team. I just think the youth on that Cougars team might be their downfall.
Yeah, and then Wisconsin and Houston. This one actually is a little bit tough for me because I do really like this Wisconsin team. I mean, Houston's just so good. That's the problem. I don't think Wisconsin is going to end up staying a 7 seed, and I do think they'll end up moving up. We talked about that earlier. So I don't think they'll end up with a tough matchup like Houston in the second round. But unfortunately for the Badgers, despite how good I think they are, I do have them going out in just the second round because of the fact that they're playing Houston.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be this hot like for essentially the next 2 months. Obviously, they're doing very well now, but to play at that high of a level against that many good teams all in a row, it's a lot to ask. And I think at some point it's going to crumble. And like against a Houston team that has played against some of the best competition day after day, week after week in the Big 12, I think they will be ready for Wisconsin, even if they are still on that big of a hot streak.
All right, moving on to the right side of the bracket again, Duke and Texas. I think Texas would have a slight chance here, but I mean, Cam Boozer, if he's playing as well as he has been all season, Duke ends up winning that one pretty easily. And then St. John's in Alabama. This one's definitely a little bit tougher. But once again, I'm kind of leaning towards the 5 seed here. I think that Alabama is just, I still think they're overrated as a 4 seed. I really think they should be closer to a 6. So yeah, I like the way that St. John's has been playing recently. I think the Red Storm are able to win that.
Yeah, it's very tough. Kind of similar situation as I forget who I talked about earlier, but I had St. John's making a deep run last year and they kind of failed me in the second round, but I do think they can get it together. And even though Alabama is a tough matchup, I do think they have the capability to beat against or win against a team that is as good as Alabama is. But we'll see if that matchup ends up shaking out, like you said, if Alabama falls a couple seeds. North Carolina and Kansas. I This is so interesting because so much hinges on Caleb Wilson for North Carolina and Darren Peterson for Kansas, two young stars that have some things going around them. With Caleb Wilson, it's more injury, but Darren Peterson, maybe it's a personality thing or whatever it is. I don't know. There's stuff swirling about him, but Kansas has still done well even without Darren Peterson on the floor. They didn't have him against Arizona when they beat them and gave the Wildcats their first loss. And honestly, that's the deciding factor for me that I think Kansas can win with or without Darren Peterson. And I don't know if North Carolina can necessarily do that without Caleb Wilson, at least for the time being, with no real information on Caleb Wilson's return date. I think the Jayhawks are the safer pick at this point.
That is the correct pick. Kansas would win that game. UCF and Illinois. I think I am going to lean Illinois there pretty easily. UCF barely made it out of the first round, so I like Illinois to get that win very handily. And then Arizona and Miami. I hinted at it earlier. This is my upset pick. I think Miami's been playing very well recently. They got the upset win over North Carolina. They're looking really solid. And I think that if there was a first or a 1 seed to lose in the first or the second round right now, sorry, that I would go with Arizona to do that. And I think this is where we see our first really big upset of the tournament with Miami pulling off that win.
Yeah, I think it would be between that and the UConn Indiana game with at least what we've picked. I don't want to think it's just recency bias with Arizona having lost 2 games in a row, but even if it is against two tough teams, like you gotta win at least one of them, and I kind of agree with that. I don't know if it will necessarily happen because Miami has been so bad the last couple of years in basketball, and this is the first year that they've kind of like risen out of it. But I kind of like the pick for right now. I think Michigan State and Arkansas. I think the highs of Michigan State are higher than Arkansas. It's really, really close. Two great head coaches, two very good programs. I'm leaning with the Spartans just ever so slightly. It's really close, and I could really see either of them winning, but I think the Spartans at times have shown that they can be like a top five team or at least a top 10 team. It's just come down to kind of a similar situation actually with Arizona, just playing against those tough teams and having to get a win against one of them, and they have shown that at times.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Kentucky and Texas Tech. I'm not even really considering Kentucky here. I think Texas Tech is a lot better. They've been a lot more consistent over the course of the season. I think they win that. And then Villanova, Purdue. I actually like Villanova here. I think that Purdue has definitely had some lows this season. And I kind of like Villanova to pull off that upset and we see a two seed drop out before the Sweet 16 as well.
Yeah, this right quadrant is like the quadrant of death. This is where all the high seeds go to die.
It always happens in one of them. There's always one where it's like a 10 seed and a 13 seed make the Sweet 16 out of one quadrant out of nowhere.
I don't hate it either. I think Purdue definitely has enough games left on their regular season schedule to kind of make an impact and maybe shut down some doubters like us at times. But as of right now, Villanova's been playing well and competed with some of those top Big East teams too. And I think this is a very real possibility.
Yeah, I mean their only bad loss is to Creighton and it was pretty close. They're 20 and 5 right now. Their other four losses are to BYU at a neutral site, at Michigan, home against St. John's, and at UConn. This Villanova team absolutely could beat a team like Purdue, who we've seen drop games to Indiana and such. So I think that one is a very possible upset. And I guess to keep the trend going, I really, really like Louisville. We saw them drop 100 points in that game against NC State. Obviously, Michigan has a better defense, but this Louisville team can shoot. We've seen that Michigan has struggled against teams that can shoot. That's how Wisconsin was able to beat them on the road. I think that Louisville actually is able to knock out the number one overall seeds in the Sweet 16 here.
Yeah, it's very close. I kind of like the pick for right now. I do think this will be a very tough matchup for Michigan, but I could easily see them getting a win here because that front court is so good and maybe even the best front court in college basketball right now. You have to keep in mind their only loss this season is to Wisconsin. It's gonna be really tough to beat the Wolverines, but I think Louisville has the potential to do it. We'll see what happens with the remainder of their schedule because they've been kind of all over the place too. But I like the pick for right now. And Gonzaga and Iowa State, I think, is also a pretty easy pick. I think the Cyclones will destroy Gonzaga. I said it before. I don't think Gonzaga, despite what some of the advanced statistics will say, like the Ken Pom ratings or whatever else, or I saw something where it's like the record against the spread or whatever it is, and Gonzaga is like one of the teams that like should be able to win a national championship. I don't see it. They've had way too many close games against teams that I don't think are going to be that competitive against the rest of the field. And for that reason, I think Iowa State is going to end up blowing the Bulldogs out.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if I agree with the blowout portion, but I do think that Gonzaga would definitely lose that game. I confidently would have Iowa State as well. UConn and Virginia. This one's also really interesting. I feel like we didn't have a lot of upsets early, and now I kind of want to pick some. And I like this Virginia team a lot. They've maybe struggled a little bit recently, but UConn reminds me a lot of Gonzaga, playing a lot of close games. And I feel like that could potentially come back to bite them. I also want to take Virginia here.
I agree. I mean, it's the same logic, and I'm not gonna be a hypocrite and go back on that logic.
All right, Florida and Houston. This is a national championship rematch in the
Yeah.
Sweet 16. And I mean, obviously the Gators won it last season. I think the biggest difference here for me, for both of these teams are very, very good. The biggest difference for me is that this game is not the national championship, and therefore I think that Houston has the ability to win and will be able to win. So I do like the Cougars to move on there to the or to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, it would be a great rematch. Obviously, Houston fans will really want that to be a win for the Cougars, but I think both those teams have a really solid chance against Virginia in the next round too, but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. Duke and St. John's. I think this is pretty handily in favor of Duke. I know the loss to North Carolina after leading for the entirety of the game, except like the last second when North Carolina hit that shot. It's kind of a bad look, but I do think they're going to adapt and learn from that and are going to actually be able to close out a lot of close games against tough opponents. And I think they've just played against so many better teams than St. John's has. Not to knock anything St. John's has done. I just think the Blue Devils are vastly superior. And it's, again, nothing against St. John's.
Yeah, Kansas and Illinois. I really like both of these teams. I feel like I've got to go Illinois here. Um, just overall, they've been really, really solid all year long. Wagler is insane. And I mean, I do like both of these teams. I just think Illinois has run into some teams at the wrong time and got their losses because of that. It's not to say that's not true for Kansas. I just like Illinois a little bit better here. I think they move on.
Yeah, I think it could go either way too. But I think the same thing as you. I think they are two great teams that could easily win this game and maybe even knock off Duke in the next round. But it is kind of sad that they would have to play each other in this bracketology. But I think for right now, like you said, Illinois, the fact that they've been led by a freshman scoring the last couple weeks, and even I think it's actually the entire season. They've just been so good and competed against so many good teams, gotten a couple big wins. It's tough, but I think Illinois is the right choice for right now. I also think Michigan State's the right choice against Miami. I think this is where the Hurricanes' run is going to end. I think, like I said before, Michigan State's been here before and can turn it up when they need to, and I think they are going to be able to in this situation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then Texas Tech, Villanova. I do think that Villanova potentially makes this a game, but I do like just overall, I like this Texas Tech team more. I think they're able to pick up the win and move on to the Elite Eight. Next round, going on to the Final Four, Louisville and Iowa State. This is a really tough one for me. I think I think Louisville is definitely underrated right now. Iowa State at the same time is has been playing really, really well. Could potentially even move up to the one line with a Big 12 tournament win. Just I really don't know what to pick here, and I think I'm going to lean towards Louisville getting to the Final Four as a 5 seed.
Oof, yeah, it's close. It's really close, and I might be leaning Iowa State just ever so slightly, but I think if any non one or two seed can make a run this deep, I think Louisville is actually that team. I think they fell short of expectations last year, and I think this is the year they kind of build it back and can get back to the Final Four.
Yeah, Virginia and Houston. This one, I'm gonna go with Houston. I think that they are a just they're a better team than Virginia, just to put it bluntly. I think the Cougars have a very solid team once again and have a realistic path to making the national championship again as well.
Yeah, I mean, Big 12 is arguably the best competition for college basketball right now, and even though they've had some close losses here and there, I still think they're going to be more than ready for the tournament once again. Duke and Illinois, I mentioned it. I think Illinois definitely has a chance in this game against Duke, but at the end of the day, Duke's got Cam Boozer, and he's been playing like the best player in college basketball right now. And I think you have to pick Duke here. It could be a close one, but I think once again, Duke has just been here so many times. They have arguably the best player in college basketball, and I think they will make the adjustments they need to kind of avoid those late game collapses that they might have had at times against some good competition.
Yeah, Michigan State, Texas Tech. This one's pretty tough for me, actually. I do think that both of these teams could very easily win this game. I'm not sure how much it matters, to be honest, who wins this game. But I mean, I'm gonna lean towards Michigan State and CJ. I just think overall they've been very, very good. Um, yeah, I think it's Cohen Carr is their star player, right?
I do not know off the top of my head. Konkar is one of them, yes.
Yeah. Oh,
There's also obviously Jeremy Fears Jr., which
yeah, that's
honestly
the
would be
other
the
one I
reason
mentioned.
I might pick Texas Tech because I don't think the NCAA and the refs are gonna let Jeremy Fears get to the Final Four. But this is a tight one. I'm probably leaning the Red Raiders ever so slightly, but I think Michigan State definitely has the potential to win this one, and I'm fine with picking them for right now.
Yeah, I mean both of these teams have won big games. But like I hinted at earlier, I'm not too sure how much it ends up mattering. Louisville and Houston. Uh, Louisville, it's a great run through the tournament so far. I feel like this Houston defense, though, it gets them so far every season. I think they can potentially make back-to-back appearances in the national championship game.
Yep, no notes. I think it's a great game between these two, but Houston's just been here so many times, and eventually I think maybe they can get a national championship under their belt. But it's gonna be tough because I think it's going back to our first bracketology from this year. I think it's gonna be against Duke again, and it just comes down to some of that experience that some of these players have and just the overall talent. It's very, very close, but you have Cam Boozer, and I think that's the ultimate difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think Duke definitely beats Michigan State, and I think Houston, until we see them win a national championship, I think that they can't end up closing it out. So. We are going to go with the Duke Blue Devils to get a national championship. Two out of three bracketologies have ended with Duke winning it. And this one, I feel like their first real competition, I would say, is really going to be Houston in that national championship game. And that certainly favors the Blue Devils. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. We're doing a bunch of college football content for the off season right now, and we'll have another bracketology out next week. So we'll see you in our next video.